Welcome. It is really wonderful to see so many faces that I know and so many that I've really only met briefly or maybe only online and some that I have never met. So I really appreciate you guys all being here and being committed to JCamps and to summer at the J because it is a really special place and everything that we're doing is for the summer. So thank you for being here. This definitely is a very different way than we all usually meet for the first time. For you people who are new, usually we are in a big space with music and introductions, and there's definitely a different energy. So this pandemic has definitely changed a lot of things, including how we all meet for the first time. I think I went over all the reminders already. I'm going to kind of dive right in to tell you guys what the plans are for the summer, hopefully be able to address a lot of the things that you may be wondering. I will give the opportunity for question and answer. The way that I'll do it is that you can write your questions in the chat. And when we get to our questions, I'll have someone ask them out loud who is assigned to do so, and I'll answer them the best that I can. And then at the very end, we'll go into breakout groups by camp. So that way, if you have questions for your specific camp director, you can ask those at that time. So just to give you a little bit of a background, JCamps is a part of a lot of guiding groups to help us make decisions and do so intentionally. We're a part of JCCA, which is the JCC Association, which is JCCs across the country. We're a part of ACA, which is the American Camp Association that puts out best practices for camps all year and has been a part of camping for a very long time. So they're leading the charge right now in best practices around COVID, as well as JCamp 180, FJC. So there's a lot of organizations that we're a part of that are helping us guide our decision making. And the thing that is really most important right now is where our state is going to end in terms of allowing us to open this summer. The Maryland Department of Health has not released guidelines quite yet about how we can run camp safely, although we have a lot of best practices and ideas of what that will look like, as well as camps right now sit in stage 2 of the Maryland Recovery Plan. So for those of you who've been following the Maryland Recovery Plan and who's allowed to open when, camp as of right now sits in stage 2. And as we found out about a week ago, even though Baltimore, Maryland may make a decision, it does not mean Baltimore County may not shift their decision because it can be based on jurisdiction. So just to give you a sense of where, who we're listening to and what we're making our decisions off of, as well as talking to a lot of medical experts, epidemiologists. We want to make sure that when we open that we're doing so in a safe way, because our number one priority in all of this is to make sure that our campers are safe and that you all are safe, because that's just our number one right now. So what our decision is, we just sent an email literally 20 minutes ago out to camp families, but we felt it was important to tell you as face-to-face as we possibly could. Which is that we are going to move forward with a modified camp season. And we anticipate hopefully being able to start on July 20th. So we are delaying the start of camp until July 20th. And we will open if the state allows us to. Like I said, we have to reach a certain stage in order to be able to legally open, and we have to make sure that with Maryland Department of Health guidelines that are forthcoming, that we can do so safely. And we will make a decision about if we're going to open on July 20th by June 26th. Because what we know is we need to give not only our families enough time to make decisions for childcare, but all of you enough time to know what your summers are going to look like and make your plans accordingly. So that is the big news. We know that there are other camps and there are other programs in Maryland that are making different decisions. Everyone has to make decisions that are best for them based on their camp, based on their organization, based on their staff, based on the programs that they run. So we are always going to think about you and our campers first in making our decisions. So you may hear other places deciding to go about this a little differently, and just understand it's really to each their own. They have to decide what's best for them. So you may be wondering what this means in terms of your employment and what camp will look like this summer. Before I really get into that, I know a lot of you may be worried about the uncertainty. It's definitely something that has been hard for me, our whole camp director team. I think we've all been living in a lot of uncertainty for a long time, and we're going to continue to be living in that for a little bit longer. So it's really important for me to share with you guys that the reason that we're still pushing forward and trying to open camp this summer, even though we know it's going to be extremely difficult, is because we want to serve our community. We want to be there for our kids. We want to be there for our families. And we know how important camp is going to be for kids this summer if we can open. Socially, kids are in a situation right now where they're by themselves if they don't have siblings, or they're living a very different lifestyle. And we already know, if you haven't ever been to camp before and this was going to be your first experience, for those of you that are returners, I'm sure that in 5 sentences you could speak to the amazing things that happen at camp in terms of the social interactions and the new things that kids learn. And it's a really special place. So even if and we know that camp will look different, but we feel strongly that families will need us, that kids will need us even more, and that I'm sure all of you are looking forward to this just as much as we are. But when will we open? If we can reopen, camp will look different. There are a lot of pieces of our program that we're not going to be able to run, and there are certain parts of our program that shouldn't be a problem, but we'll have to do so in a different way. So because of that, when we do relaunch, hopefully on July 20th, it will be Summer at the J. And all of our programs that we offer now as a part of JCamps, for the most part, will be mirrored in our Summer at the J model. But we're changing the name a little bit to match parent expectations. We don't want families to go in expecting something that they've received in previous years and get something a little bit different. And it's really only going to be to keep their kids safe. So we feel very strongly that everyone will understand, and families will understand why we're making those changes. But we don't want parents to expect an in-person showcase in Habima when we know that that's not something we're going to be allowed to do this summer. So it's kind of playing that expectation side of things. We wrote in our email to families that we will launch Summer at the J if we can, and that by June 1st, we'll share more specifics about what these programs will look like. And we'll also share that with you. It will likely be more of an email format, but what we share with families, our goal will be to share with you as well. And lastly, before getting into some of the specifics about how this is going to work, is just wanting to tell you guys that even though we're shifting probably how some of our programs are going to look, that you guys are the backbone of camp. We say this a lot during orientation because it's really true. Our staff are the reason that our kids want to come back to camp year after year. It's the relationships that they create with our counselors and the exciting things that they do in their specialties that make camp exciting. So it's all of you guys that really make camp, whether we call it JCamps or we call it Summer at the J. You're why the kids come. So I have no doubt that whether we call it one thing or the other, that kids will leave their day being happy because you guys will be there for them. So it does mean that we'll have less weeks of camp. So if you were hired for 8 weeks of J-Day or 8 weeks of Habima, or 11 weeks of tennis camp, it does mean that our summer will be cut a little short. So staff contracts will have to be redone. They'll be about half of what you were offered from the original contract, because we're going to have about half of the weeks. But we do want to make sure that we get some information from you guys as well, because there is a chance that we don't have as many kids as are enrolled right now. There are families that don't feel comfortable sending their kids to camp. There are some families that still do. And we're going to have to see how many kids we still have in the program. And our goal is to make sure that anyone who was offered a position, that we have something for you. However, we have to see what happens with this email that went out today, and where families end and whether they feel comfortable sending their kids. Our kind of go-to will be if the position that we originally offered you is not something that we have. If there is an alternate position that we can come to you with, that will be something that we would do first. And then we're going to go from there. I just want to be open and honest and transparent with you guys about where we are in this process, which is we want everyone here. We just have to make sure that we have enough kids to keep everything the way that we planned and in the positions that you have now. We are going to send out a staff form probably towards the end of next week. So keep an eye on your email. It's going to allow us to gather some information from you as opposed to you having to email all of your directors separately. It'll include things if you are still interested in working this summer. It may be that you may have a medical thing that you say camp isn't something that I can do anymore for whatever reason. And that is not something that will be held against you in a possibility of being rehired next year. We want to make sure that you guys stay safe. So think about your own health as well in filling out this form and deciding if you feel comfortable working in camp this summer. Because as much as we will take every measure imaginable to make sure that we keep you safe, there is going to be a level of risk in being in and around kids this summer, and just being in groups. And there will be a waiver that all families and all staff will fill out and before you're able to work, just to make sure you understand what those risks are. So let me just see if there's anything else I missed on my notes. And in the mock form as well, one thing that is going to shift is going to be vacation requests. We know that some of you have put in for vacation requests when you originally enroll or applied to us. We may have accepted them because of the way that we're going to have to structure groups, and because we're only going to be running 4 weeks of our regular camping platform. We're not going to be accepting vacation requests again. So when you fill out the mock form, you'll have a place to indicate if you are okay not doing the vacation request that you originally had asked for, because we're going to have to make sure that we have really lenient policies regarding if someone doesn't feel well. So we need to make sure that all floaters at all times are available for anyone if they need to leave camp or if they're not feeling well and they can't come in for a few days. The other thing it will include is if you are interested in working any post-week camps, you do not have to work post-week camps. You saying you are available for post-week will not determine whether or not, it won't have any indication of what it'll affect your job for weeks 4 through 8 at all. We're just trying to gather more information about how many more staff will be around for our post-weeks if we can offer more options at that time. So those are the kinds of questions that will be included on that form. So now that I've talked a lot and I've let you know what we're doing, I'm going to open it up. I see there's like 15 things in here. And we are going to start asking, I'm going to start answering some questions. So Stacy, are you around here somewhere?
I am here, but I literally just joined and my chat doesn't have any questions in it.
I can, Emily,
I think I
can ask the question.
I'm sorry.
All right. That's okay. All right, Brad, you are up.
Okay. What about if Baltimore City is not open yet, can I still go to work Camp Kulanu? I could not figure out how to do the renaming.
Say that again.
If Baltimore City is not open yet, can I still go to work?
So Camp Kulanu exists. So it's actually interesting. Our camps rest in 2 different jurisdictions. One is Baltimore County and our Owings Mills campus, and one is Baltimore City and Kulanu. So it is very possible that if Baltimore County makes one decision and Baltimore City makes a different decision, that there are different decisions that we have to make for different camps. We hope to be able to keep things consistent, but if Baltimore City has a stay-at-home and doesn't reach stage 2, then there may be a possibility that Kulanu doesn't run and the camps at Owings Mills run, or vice versa. That if Baltimore County doesn't open and we can't legally run camps at Owings Mills, but Baltimore City does open and we can in Park Heights, that we may have to make separate decisions based on location alone because of that reason.
All right, next question. Are the boys going to be able to swim?
So swimming is definitely a very interesting question across the board. And it's different because of the indoor pools and the outdoor pools. It is very unlikely that we are going to be able to open indoor pools this summer. and that Kulanu will be swimming. It is still a question mark as to whether pools outside are going to be able to open this summer. And if they are, then instructional swim is likely something that will be off the table, because anytime you think about an activity that we're doing, we have to take into consideration what the hands-on approach is going to be. And for something like instructional swim, when you have to hold a child in the water, we can't have multiple people having interactions with kids in those ways during this. So free swim would likely be the only thing on the table for Owings Mills camps if we're allowed to open outdoor pools. And a lot of the answers to these questions, just so you know, are going to be a little bit wishy-washy, because we don't have solid guidelines yet from the Maryland Department of Health, and we don't know if we're going to be allowed to open pools yet. But if there is a type of pool that's going to be open, it's going to be outdoor pools before indoor pools. And for anyone wondering, all research shows that COVID-19 does not live in the water with the chlorine, that the chlorine does kill it, which is great, but we also have to think about the social distancing aspect when we are in a pool as well.
Okay, next question. I do not have a printer that works. Will I be able to get it mailed, or so can I sign and send it back that way?
Waivers, yeah. So every form that we'll have will likely be online. It'll be a waiver that we'll have in your Camp in Touch account, just like we have for anything else. If it is something that we need printed out, like some kinds, like we're still going to have to go through a hiring process like we usually do. So we'll work with everyone in trying to make sure that we get the paperwork that we need from all of you. It just might be a process as we're trying to completely rethink how we do it, and come up with new systems.
Great. Next question. Is there a plan for buses?
So, very good question. As of right now, it is unlikely that we're going to be running busing this summer. It's not something that we have announced to families because it's not something we're ready to announce to the community, because we have to make a final decision. However, if you are a bus counselor, it is likely something that we will not be running. The reason being, and just to explain a little bit about how groups will work this summer, is that when you think of a bunk of kids, a lot of professionals are calling those pods or a household. So right now you're at home and you're with your household all day. That's how we have to approach the summer as well. So a group of kids that is usually in a bunk becomes a household, and that household may not necessarily have to wear PPE, which is like the masks and the gloves and all that kind of stuff, may not have to wear PPE around each other. But when we go to a place where we're walking through the building, maybe from place to place, and we may pass other people, or if we're in a space where there's going to be more than one pod together, that may be a time where we have to make sure that we are socially distanced from each other. The question with busing comes is that when you have a group of kids that is on a bus, that then separates out to all of your pods, your risk is going to be expanded. And our entire goal this summer is going to be to minimize risk as much as possible to keep our campers and our staff safe. So busing is one thing that will expose more people to risk.
Okay, next question. This is from a JCamps Plus staff member. Sounds like the only center open will be the J in Owings Mills for camp, question mark?
Oh, sorry. That was just an oversight on my part in the way that I was speaking. We're still considering all of our camps and options and how and what we're going to run. So by June 1st, we'll have a much better idea of what we're running and where we're running. The thing with JCamps Plus is that it is the place, JCamps Plus, for any of you that don't know, is some camps that run at Krieger Schechter Day School. We don't own that building, so we don't have as much control over whether or not we're going to be allowed to be there. So there's just a few more things that we have to consider with that site. But our goal, like I said, is to run as many programs as we can, but each director will be able to share more as we know more.
Great. Let me make sure I didn't miss. Okay. Will inclusion be able to continue if camp plans on opening?
Yes. It is. Okay. We want inclusion. Inclusion is a part of our program, and we are going to make sure that we can serve our community. The only thing that we have to consider is kids' medical needs and high-risk populations, and how. And we want to make sure that we protect our staff as well. So if we have campers that would have to be one-on-one and very hands-on with a camper just due to their ability. It's something that we're considering on a one-to-one, a case-by-case scenario. But generally, inclusion is something that we are still committed to.
Great. To clarify, if we had previous scheduled vacation for the period that camp is planning on running right now, we won't be able to get the time off now? Question mark.
Correct. So we have to reevaluate all of vacation requests because of that, the pods that I just talked about. So counselors will stay with their pod of kids throughout the week. The more that we have staff that are requesting off, the more in and out we have of interactions with staff and the more risk exposure that we have. So it is going to be important to us that we have staff that can work all weeks between June 20th and August the 14th. It may be we have to have one-on-one conversations with a few people about what it is and how it works, but we are going to give it is something that's going to be important to us in having to plan for this summer.
Great. How will you handle maintaining social distancing amongst the youngest kids who may not understand how important it is?
Yeah, so I think I answered this question a little bit in describing what the pods are. So as we all know, as adults, it's hard to socially distance. So for kids, you can imagine how much harder that is to even understand. So the pod itself doesn't have to socially distance from one another, but one pod and the second pod need to socially distance. So like for instance, when we go to lunch, we're going to have a lot more lunch shifts to make sure that we don't have the entire camp in one place at one time, to make sure that the pods can stay separate. We can still have kids sitting next to each other on picnic tables, but we're probably not going to cram 8 kids on a 6-foot picnic table. We would set it to 4 kids to make sure that we give each other space. We're going to be thinking about the types of activities that we have. So in terms of like contact sports, we're not going to be purposely putting our kids in a situation where they will be wanting to be on top of each other and not be social distancing, but that pod itself can be closer to each other than from one group to the next. And that's the way that we understand it now. And like I said, guidelines can constantly change and that may shift, but that is the way that it's been explained to us and the way that we're moving forward with planning.
This next one is a 2-part question. Will children need to wear masks? What will the major difference be?
So we don't know yet. That's a really big question mark right now with the guidelines, and it will be determined by the Maryland Department of Health of who needs to wear masks. Right now, we know for schools they're saying under 2 that you shouldn't require masks. Over the age of 2, that you could. However, we also know that there's heat elements, and as an adult myself, I have a hard time wearing it when I'm outside. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to take into consideration. It's going to likely go back to that pod question, which is it may be that there are certain times that we have to wear masks briefly as we move from one place to the other. Or for instance, if you're a specialist who's going to see multiple groups a day, it may be more mandatory for a staff member who's a specialist who's going to see multiple groups to wear a mask because you won't be a part of that pod. However, when you are just within your group, that will be different. So that's how we're approaching it right now, but we don't know until we get more guidance.
And actually, just to piggyback on that, the JDA specialist that I oversee, I will follow up with you in the next couple of weeks once we know information for the specialist side. Okay, next question. Mm-hmm. Will the J be open to the public during camp?
As of right now, yes. So we're thinking a lot strategically about how we're going to be able to keep our campers and our members separate. But yes, as of right now, the plan is for both groups to be able to be at the JCC at the same time.
If camp opens, would you require all staff to be taking a temperature?
Really good question. And there's a lot of question around screening right now. There's different kinds of screening. There's pre-screening and screening when you arrive at camp. We will for sure be having some kind of screening when staff and campers arrive at camp. It will likely be temperature checks. That's the easiest screening to do, that and symptom checking. So for right now, yes, we believe so. But once again, that's kind of falls into the category of we're still learning more about what we are permitted to do and how we're going to do
Great. What does happen in case of a camper staff testing positive for COVID?
Another really good question. That's actually a policy that we're still managing and figuring out. The American Camp Association put out best practices in terms of some medical pieces, but they're best practices. They're not the guidelines. It will for sure be, it's part of the reason that we exist in pods. So that way, if there is a positive case, it would be a quarantine for that pod and not the entire camp. At least that's the thought process, but we don't know if that's going to be how it's going to happen or not. Obviously, our prayers would be that that wouldn't happen, but we also have to have plans in place in case it does.
You already answered about temperature checks, so I can move on. Would staff need to isolate 2 weeks before camp?
So that's a good question. We don't know the answer to that yet. It will likely be determined based on if you're choosing to leave the state or not, and what the guidelines are around that. We'll set a policy. It will likely be if you have chosen to leave the state that we may say that we would like you to isolate for 2 weeks to some degree before you arrive in person, but we don't know what the guidelines are going to be around that yet or what legally will be the case. So.
Great. Does Noah's Ark follow JCamps policies or ELC policies in terms of how they run this summer?
ELC. So the JCamps and the ELC run on 2 different licenses. One is for childcare and one is for camp. And while Noah's Ark and also Camp Ami, if you're at Park Heights, are absolutely, they feel like a part of camp. They wear JCamps t-shirts. We have to kind of go back to where our licenses live and where those guidelines are going to come from. So it may be that that things will be a little different for each population. So Noah's Ark will follow ELC guidelines and rules. But we're going to try to align them as much as possible to make it consistent.
Great. Will the bunks have hand sanitizers available? What about sunscreen for younger children?
So this is going to be the last question, and then we're going to break out into groups for the next 10-15 minutes. So sanitizer, yes. We are working with the JCC to make sure that we have available extra hand washing stations, sanitizer, all of those kind of things to make sure that we can, that is going to be the goal of this summer. Is the way to keep ourselves the safest is by using proper hand washing technique. So there's going to be a lot of training around that and making sure that we give you the things that you'll need to do that with your kids. Sunscreen for younger campers, it's always an interesting topic. It's actually something where, like I mentioned earlier, we're part of a lot of guiding groups and listservs. That question comes up a lot on how to manage sunscreen. We're going to have to figure out how we can safely and put sunscreen on younger kids. It may be that we have a lot of gloves and helping them with gloves. It's going to be something that we'll address for sure. I don't have an exact answer on it yet. But once again, I kind of go back to the pod, which is if you're a staff member within the pod, then helping your kids in those ways you'll be allowed to do, but like wearing a mask while you're doing it may be something that will be required. So we're going to manage those policies as we move through this process, really. Okay, so if you have not already done so, now is the time to change your name and your camp. Carly, how you doing?
I am great.
Good. All right. So what's gonna happen?
Yeah. So
sorry. So what's gonna
go ahead. You go.
No, I was just gonna say that if you end up in a group and you're there and you're like, this doesn't look quite right, it's fine. It just means that just click re-enter to main lobby and we'll get you to the right group. So if you get someone you're like, I don't recognize any of these people, we'll just click that button and we'll get you back out. We are gonna put about a time limit of about 15 minutes on these breakout groups. So by 12:50 we'll be finished our call. If you do have follow-up questions, feel free to email your camp directors. I know I tried to answer questions the best that I could. We're still things that are a lot up in the air. And we're going to do our best to make camp happen for all of us this summer. So thank you guys all for being here. And I look forward, hopefully, to seeing everyone before camp starts.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So hi, everyone. 15 minutes went by a lot faster than I thought, so maybe we needed a little bit more time. Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for being on the call today. I hope I was able to answer your questions, give you a little bit more clarity about this summer, and just know that we are doing our best to be here for our families, to be here for you guys. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email us. The last thing I said on my call was just give us a little bit of time. We're getting a lot of parent questions as well right now, going into a 3-day weekend, but our goal is going to be to get back to you as soon as we can. So just be a little bit patient with us if you can, and we'll do our best. And we really hope to see you on July 20th, if not earlier, for some in-person training. So. All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat shalom to anyone who celebrates, and have a great weekend.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Bye, everyone.